In the vast, cold reaches of the universe, where power meant everything, the alien demigod known as Star was once a force of unstoppable might. Star wasn't just a weapon, it was a living legend, revered and feared across the galaxy. The empires that worshipped Star had expanded through brutal conquests, and every world that fell to their rule was a testament to the demigod's devastating power. Entire fleets were vaporized in seconds, planets scorched to ashes, and any who dared oppose the empire's will were wiped out with ruthless precision. Star had always known its role, a being created, or perhaps simply discovered, by the empire to be their most powerful tool. It fought in their wars without question, acting as both executioner and protector. For centuries, no enemy could challenge Star's might. Battles were won the moment it appeared on the battlefield. Its presence alone was enough to instill terror in the hearts of countless civilizations. Yet, as with all things, time brings change. The galaxy grew more complex, alliances shifted, and the enemies of the Empire grew more cunning. It was during one such campaign that Star, for the first time in its long existence, faced true defeat. A coalition of alien races, fueled by their desperation and united in their fear of Star, unleashed a weapon designed specifically to neutralize its powers. This weapon, forged from technologies Star had never encountered, struck it down. In an instant, the demigod's invincibility was shattered. Wounded beyond anything it had experienced, Star was reduced to a husk of its former self. The defeat wasn't just a physical blow, it was a spiritual one. For a being that had only known victory, the pain of loss was a foreign and crushing sensation. Star tried to fight back, tried to summon the energy to destroy its enemies, but its once limitless power had been drained, leaving it weak, broken. The empire it had served for millennia, seeing the demigod now as a liability, made a cold, pragmatic decision. Star was no longer their savior, no longer their unbreakable force. It was a weapon that had failed, and in their eyes, there was no place for failure. So they abandoned Star, leaving it to die on the very planet where it had been defeated. It was a war-ravaged world, once a thriving hub of commerce, now reduced to rubble and ruins. The atmosphere was thick with the stench of destruction, the ground littered with the wreckage of ships and the bones of long-dead warriors. Star, still weak, could do nothing but lie there, struggling to survive, its immense form dwarfed by the vast wasteland that surrounded it. For the first time, it was alone. Truly alone. Days passed, or perhaps it was weeks. Time lost all meaning as Star lingered on the edge of death. The once mighty demigod, who had commanded entire armies with a thought, was now reduced to nothing more than a shadow of its former self. Its own people had forsaken it, its enemies had left it to rot, and the universe seemed content to forget it ever existed. It was then, in this moment of despair, that Star first encountered humans. They were a species the demigod had barely acknowledged before. In the grand scale of the galaxy, humans were little more than an afterthought, a minor race with no significant power or influence. They were considered too primitive to be of any real concern by the larger empires. Yet here they were, on this desolate planet, seemingly by chance. The humans arrived in a small, unremarkable ship, clearly not part of the grand fleet Star had once commanded. They were scavengers, explorers seeking out what little value they could find in the remnants of the battles that had ravaged this world. They didn't come with weapons drawn, didn't come to fight. They came to survive, just like Star. At first, the demigod thought nothing of them. In its weakened state, Star barely registered their presence. It saw them as little more than pests, insignificant beings picking through the ruins of its failure. But as the humans ventured closer, it became clear that they had noticed Star. One of them, a figure in a simple suit, cautiously approached the massive, fallen form of the demigod. Star, despite its injuries, attempted to summon its power, to drive these insignificant creatures away. But nothing happened. Its powers, once so absolute, had left it. It could do nothing as the human knelt beside it, examining its wounds with a mixture of curiosity and concern. What Star expected was fear. After all, it had spent its entire existence being feared by lesser beings. But these humans didn't show fear. Instead, they showed something that Star had never encountered before: empathy. The human, speaking in a language the demigod didn't understand, seemed to be discussing something with its comrades. And then, without warning, they began to help. The demigod couldn't believe what was happening. These creatures, these insignificant humans, were tending to its wounds, applying strange, primitive tools to its damaged body. It was humiliating, and yet, in its weakened state, Star had no choice but to accept their aid. As the humans worked, Star found itself observing them more closely. Their technology was crude by the standards of the galaxy, and yet they seemed to use it with an efficiency that surprised the demigod. They didn't have the advanced tools of the great empires, but they made do with what they had, improvising in ways that Star had never seen before. Slowly, painfully, the demigod began to regain a fraction of its strength. It still couldn't understand why these humans were helping it. They owed it nothing, and they had no reason to believe that it wouldn't destroy them once it recovered. And yet they continued undeterred. Star tried to speak, tried to communicate with them, but its language was too alien for the humans to comprehend. Still, they seemed to understand its intent. They weren't here to fight or conquer. They were here simply to survive, just as Star was. The humans, oblivious to the demigod's significance, continued their work. They moved methodically, patching up what they could with their limited resources. Star watched, confused by their motivations. There was no gain for them in helping, no glory or victory to be won by aiding a fallen entity like itself. It had always believed that lesser beings acted out of self-interest, yet these humans were different. They did not seem to expect anything in return. That puzzled Star more than anything else. As the humans continued their work, Star observed them more closely. Their interactions with one another were strange compared to the rigid, hierarchical nature of the galactic powers it had served. There was an ease in how they communicated, a casualness that spoke of equality among them. It was clear they weren't soldiers or scientists, at least, not in the way Star understood those roles. They were explorers, scavengers, driven by curiosity and necessity, not conquest. Despite their primitive tools, the humans were effective. They didn't work with the precision of the alien species Star was used to, but they had a way of solving problems that was undeniably creative. They seemed to adapt to challenges on the fly, finding unconventional ways to stabilize Star's condition. One of the humans, a woman with a device Star had never seen, managed to temporarily restore a fragment of its power by rerouting some kind of energy flow. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was enough to stop the demigod's condition from deteriorating further. The more Star observed, the more it found itself intrigued by these creatures. They were fragile, weak compared to the other species of the galaxy, and yet they refused to be cowed by the overwhelming odds they faced. Even here, on a war-torn planet where danger lurked in every corner, they moved with purpose, not fear. It was a stark contrast to how the demigod had been treated by its own people, who had fled the moment it had shown weakness. One human, the apparent leader, approached Star more frequently than the others. The leader would talk, though Star didn't understand the words. There was a tone of reassurance, a strange confidence that these humans were here to help and that they would not abandon it. Star couldn't comprehend why this primitive race would bother with such a lost cause. What did they hope to gain? Why invest so much effort in something that had already been forsaken by far more powerful beings? Slowly, over time, Star's perception began to shift. At first, it had regarded the humans with disdain, seeing them as insignificant creatures far beneath its notice. But the more time it spent in their care, the more it realized that there was something remarkable about them. Their technology may have been crude, their methods unconventional, but their resilience was undeniable. They adapted to every challenge they encountered with a determination that Star had never seen before. In the face of their perseverance, the demigod's arrogance started to fade. Star had always been defined by its power, its role as a weapon, but now it was powerless. It had nothing to offer, no great strength to wield, and yet the humans treated it as something worth saving. The realization that these beings, who had no reason to care, were choosing to help regardless shook the demigod's understanding of the universe. Power was everything, or so Star had believed. But these humans didn't seem to care about power at all. They cared about survival, about each other, and now, inexplicably, about Star. The demigod began to see the humans not as weaklings but as something more, survivors. They had no grand fleets, no vast empires, yet they survived where others would have perished. Star had watched civilizations crumble under the weight of their own arrogance, yet these humans, with their lack of resources and standing in the galaxy, were thriving in ways that defied its expectations. Star found itself wondering if it had been wrong all along. The galaxy revered strength, power, and dominance, and yet here were these humans, thriving not because of their might, but because of their creativity, their ability to adapt. They didn't conquer with force, they conquered through persistence. Where others would have fled, they stood firm. It was a kind of strength that Star had never considered before, a strength that wasn't tied to the sheer force of power but to the will to endure. As days passed, Star began to regain some of its strength, albeit slowly. The humans continued to assist, even as the situation around them grew more perilous. They didn't seem to care about the looming dangers of the planet, or the fact that they were outmatched by the larger forces that still roamed the galaxy. Their focus was on helping, on surviving, on moving forward, no matter the odds. In one particular moment, Star saw something that struck it deeply. The humans were facing a malfunction in their equipment, something that, by all accounts, should have been catastrophic. Yet, instead of panicking or giving up, they worked together to find a solution, even as everything seemed to be falling apart around them. They improvised, using what little they had to fix the problem. Star realized, in that moment, that this was the true power of humanity, not their technology or their strength, but their ability to adapt and survive in the face of overwhelming adversity. It was a humbling experience for the demigod. For so long, Star had believed in the superiority of its own power, its own kind. But now, it was beginning to see the value in something else, something it had never understood before. The humans didn't need to be the most powerful. They simply needed to survive. And in doing so, they had achieved something that no other race in the galaxy had done, something that even Star's own people had failed to do. They had earned its respect. Star, though still weakened, made a silent vow. These humans had given it something it hadn't known it needed: hope. And in return, the demigod would protect them. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was a start. For the first time in its existence, Star felt a sense of purpose that wasn't tied to conquest or destruction. It felt the need to protect something that wasn't itself. As the humans continued to work, unaware of the profound shift taking place within the demigod, Star watched them with a newfound sense of awe. These fragile, insignificant creatures had shown it a strength that went beyond power, beyond the galaxy's understanding of dominance. They had shown Star what it truly meant to survive. As Star spent more time with the humans, the relationship began to shift in ways that surprised even the demigod. No longer was it a mere passive observer. These humans, despite their primitive means, had managed to stabilize its condition, giving it time to slowly regain some of its abilities. What astonished Star wasn't just their ability to help but how they approached every situation with a combination of practicality and creativity that it had never encountered in all its eons of existence. It watched them as they worked tirelessly to repair their ship, to improve their equipment with whatever limited resources they could scavenge from the war-torn landscape. They didn't have the luxury of advanced technology or limitless power, but what they did have was something far more valuable: ingenuity. They adapted to every obstacle with a combination of clever thinking and teamwork that seemed almost effortless. For every setback, they found a workaround. For every problem, they found a solution. Whereas Star's former allies would have given up or turned on one another in such dire circumstances, these humans persisted without hesitation. One of the crew members managed to fix a critical system on their ship by repurposing parts from alien wreckage, something that, in Star's mind, should have been impossible. They had no manuals, no instructions, just intuition and trial and error. It wasn't the sleek, calculated efficiency of the other advanced species in the galaxy. It was messy, it was chaotic, and yet somehow it worked. Star found itself intrigued. What drove these humans? Their lack of fear was perplexing. It wasn't that they were unaware of the danger, they clearly understood it all too well, but they didn't let it control them. They didn't fall into despair as so many other species had when facing overwhelming odds. Instead, they seemed to thrive under pressure, using it as fuel to push themselves even further. The demigod had never seen anything like it. In moments of quiet, Star observed their camaraderie. There was a bond between them, a deep connection that went beyond mere survival. They joked with one another, even in the face of danger, lightening the mood with humor that Star didn't fully understand but could sense was important. It was another thing that set them apart from the species it had encountered before. For others, survival was a grim, joyless endeavor. But for humans, even in their most difficult moments, there was laughter, there was connection. It wasn't just about living, it was about living together. What surprised Star even more was that they included it in this strange dynamic. The humans didn't treat it like a superior being, nor did they fear it like others had. They spoke to it, not with reverence, but with the same casual ease that they spoke to each other. It was jarring at first for the demigod, who had always been seen as something either to be worshipped or feared. But the humans, they treated it as one of them, a member of their crew, their group. There was no hierarchy here, no power dynamics. Just people working together to survive. Star's mind, once filled with thoughts of dominance and superiority, began to shift. The humans, despite their weaknesses, had something far more valuable than power. They had resilience, a kind of stubborn refusal to be defeated that Star had never encountered before. It wasn't just their physical endurance, though that was impressive in itself. It was their emotional strength, their ability to push forward despite the odds. They didn't dwell on their failures. They didn't wallow in despair. They simply adapted and kept moving. There was one particular moment that solidified this realization for Star. A critical system on their ship had malfunctioned, putting the entire crew in immediate danger. The humans didn't panic. Instead, they worked together, each contributing their own knowledge and skills to fix the issue. They didn't wait for orders from some superior. They acted, each trusting the other to do what was necessary. And they succeeded. The crisis was averted, not through brute force, but through cooperation and quick thinking. Star had never seen anything like it in all its years of fighting for the Empire. Its former allies had relied solely on strength and power. When faced with a problem, they would overpower it or simply flee. But humans? They faced every challenge head-on, using whatever they had at their disposal, no matter how limited, and they did it together. It wasn't power that made them strong, it was their adaptability, their unity. As the days passed, Star found itself growing stronger, not just physically but mentally. The humans had given it more than just a second chance at survival. They had shown it a new way of thinking, a new way of being. Star had always believed that power was the only path to victory, but now, it understood that there was more to strength than just raw might. These humans, who had once seemed so insignificant, were proving themselves to be more formidable than any of the empires Star had ever known. Not because of their technology or their weapons, but because of their spirit, their refusal to give up, no matter how dire the situation. For the first time, Star began to feel something it hadn't felt in millennia: hope. Hope that perhaps there was more to existence than endless war and conquest. Hope that there was something worth fighting for beyond power. The humans, in their own strange way, had given Star a new purpose, a reason to continue. Not as a weapon, but as something more. It was in these quiet moments of reflection that Star made a decision. If it was to survive, if it was to truly reclaim its strength, it would do so not as a tool of destruction but as an ally to these humans. They had shown it a different kind of strength, one that went beyond the battlefield. They had shown it the strength of unity, of adaptability, of resilience. And in return Star would protect them. Not out of obligation, not because it owed them anything, but because, for the first time in its long existence, it wanted to. It wanted to stand beside these humans, to fight for them, to learn from them. It wanted to be part of something bigger than itself. The humans had given Star something it had never known it needed, a sense of belonging. And that was more powerful than anything it had ever wielded before. As the human crew went about their tasks, something shifted in the atmosphere. A transmission came through their comms, a warning of an incoming alien fleet, part of the coalition that had originally defeated Star. They were heading for the planet, intent on wiping out any remaining survivors from the war and scavenging whatever they could from the ruins. The humans knew their ship wasn't equipped to handle a direct confrontation. Their technology, impressive in its adaptability, was no match for the advanced weaponry that the approaching alien forces undoubtedly possessed. Star, now regaining enough strength to sense the impending threat, could feel the power of the approaching fleet. The demigod knew who they were, remnants of the coalition that had turned on it, and their intentions were clear. They were coming to finish what they had started, and in doing so, would destroy everything in their path, including the humans who had helped Star survive. The demigod watched as the humans quickly prepared for the inevitable. There was no panic, no despair. Instead, they immediately began working on a plan. Their ship wasn't fast enough to escape, and they didn't have the firepower to take on the alien fleet head-on. But that didn't stop them. If anything, the humans seemed even more focused, their determination sharpening with the knowledge of the incoming danger. They didn't entertain the idea of giving up, not for a moment. Star, still recovering, felt a surge of something it hadn't experienced in centuries: anger. Not the cold, calculated anger of war, but a deep, personal fury at the thought of these humans being wiped out. They had saved it, not out of obligation or fear, but because it was the right thing to do. They had shown it a side of the universe it had never seen before, and now they were about to be destroyed for it. The demigod couldn't allow that to happen. Slowly, painfully, Star rose to its full height, its power still only a fraction of what it had once been, but enough to be felt. The humans paused, looking up at the towering figure they had nursed back to life. Star had made a decision. It would fight, not for conquest, not to prove its dominance, but to protect these beings who had given it a second chance. The humans, sensing Star's intent, didn't try to stop it. Instead, they began adjusting their plans to incorporate the demigod's newfound resolve. They didn't question its motives, didn't ask for assurances. They simply trusted that Star was with them. That unspoken bond, that mutual understanding, filled the demigod with a renewed sense of purpose. As the alien fleet neared the planet, Star and the humans moved into action. The humans, with their characteristic resourcefulness, devised a strategy that relied not on brute force but on misdirection and calculated risks. They had rigged parts of the ship to create a diversion, making it appear as though they had far more firepower than they actually did. Meanwhile, Star, using the limited energy it had regained, prepared to strike from the shadows, targeting the weak points in the alien fleet's formation. When the alien ships entered the planet's atmosphere, they were met with what appeared to be a heavily fortified defense. The humans, knowing they couldn't win through direct confrontation, had set up a series of traps and false signals, drawing the alien forces into a carefully laid out ambush. Star, despite still being weakened, struck with precision, taking out key ships and creating confusion among the alien ranks. The humans, in their nimble, quick-thinking way, adapted to every twist and turn of the battle. They didn't follow a rigid plan. Instead, they adjusted their tactics on the fly, taking advantage of every opportunity that arose. Star marveled at their ability to think outside the box, to improvise in ways that no other species it had fought alongside could. It wasn't just about surviving. They were actively outsmarting an enemy that should have easily overpowered them. The alien fleet, caught off guard by the combined efforts of the humans and the demigod, began to falter. Their superior technology meant nothing in the face of such unpredictable tactics. The humans worked in tandem with Star, coordinating strikes and misdirections with an efficiency that belied their supposed lack of power. The aliens, accustomed to overwhelming their opponents with sheer force, were completely unprepared for the creative, unconventional assault they now faced. As the battle raged on, Star found its strength returning in ways it hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just the physical power that was coming back, but a deeper, more profound sense of purpose. For so long, it had fought because it was commanded to, because it had no choice. But now, for the first time, it fought because it wanted to, because it had something to fight for. These humans, with their reckless bravery and unshakable resolve, had given Star something it hadn't known it was missing: a reason to care. In the final moments of the battle, as the alien fleet began to retreat, Star unleashed one last, devastating blow. It wasn't the all-encompassing destruction it had once wielded, but it was enough to cripple the remaining ships and force their withdrawal. The aliens, humiliated and beaten, fled the planet, leaving behind nothing but the wreckage of their defeat. The humans, though battered and exhausted, had won. Against all odds, they had survived, not through strength of arms, but through sheer will and ingenuity. Star, standing among them, felt a sense of pride that it had never experienced before. These humans had not only saved it, but they had taught it something far more valuable than power. They had shown it the true meaning of resilience, of fighting not just to win, but to protect what mattered. As the dust settled, Star looked down at the humans who had trusted it, who had fought beside it as equals. There was no grand declaration of victory, no celebration. They simply moved forward, already focused on the next task, the next challenge. That was their way, Star realized. They didn't dwell on the past or bask in their accomplishments. They kept moving, always forward, always adapting. Star knew then that it had found something far more powerful than the empire it had once served. It had found a new purpose, a new alliance that wasn't based on fear or control, but on trust and mutual respect. And in that moment, the demigod understood that this was where it belonged, among these strange, unpredictable humans, who had shown it what it truly meant to survive. From that day forward, Star was no longer the weapon of an empire, no longer a tool of destruction. It was a protector, a guardian, bound not by power, but by the bonds it had forged with the humans who had given it a second chance at life. Together, they would face whatever challenges the galaxy had in store, not as conquerors, but as survivors. And in that they were unstoppable.